Okay. It's 7:11 p.m. on October 6th, 2022. We'll call for this regular meeting of the Reading Board of Education. All members are in minutes except for Mr. Valfato, who we understand is running late. Traffic. First item of business is the consent agenda on the minutes of December 6th. My understanding is there are no minutes special meeting at the moment, so we'll pass that. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on the regular meeting minutes of December 6th? I would just note for the purpose of the minutes that we should be clear from an FOI perspective that ballot round number 1, there were 2 votes for Nelson. The votes were cast by Hoffman and Valfato. There were 2 votes for Guarneri. The votes were cast by Sedana and Holton. There was 1 vote for Shanahan cast by Gibbons and 1 vote for Benjamin cast by Parkin. There are subsequently 4 ballot rounds that were 3-3. All of those ballot rounds are the same, with Hoffman, Valfato, and Parkin for Nelson, and Holton, Sedana, and Gibbons for Shanahan. And in the final round, the only vote that changed was mine from Nelson to Shanahan. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll look for a motion to adopt with that change. Mike, seconds. Discussion, all in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Move on to public comment. The public which could be heard. Seeing none, we'll right along to board member comment.
Welcome, John.
Yeah. And then on to administrative report. Sorry.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you for bearing with us as we had some technical challenges. It is important that we present our student achievement results and that the public can see those results, and you can see them in the audience tonight. So thank you for waiting while we resolve that. For our administrative reports, we generally start with our school principals. So I would like Melissa to just give a brief overview of what's happening at Reading Elementary School. We have a significant portion of the agenda this evening dedicated to student achievement, district and school goals. So our goal is to be brief and do some administrative updates.
Good evening, everyone. So September was a very busy month. I can't believe we're already in the month of October. First month of school it's over. It's crazy. A couple of highlights from our month of September was International Peace Day. We celebrated International Peace Day with Pinwheels for Peace, which is historically a tradition at RES. On September 29th, students gathered outside to the front of the school building. They sang songs. They planted their pinwheels into the ground to create one large peace sign. We were very lucky to have one of our RES family members donate his time to be able to take some really cool drone shots of the pinwheel and the peace sign all together. It turned out to be a really beautiful day. We are very excited to introduce this year 4th grade student council. So our 4th graders are going to be, any 4th grader interested in this leadership opportunity is going to be filling out a kind of ballot, not a ballot, but I guess the description for the why they would like to be part of this leadership opportunity. Our assistant principal, Kim Roy, is kind of leading this opportunity as part of our school climate committee. And we're very excited to be able to bring back full school assemblies and other opportunities that our students will be able to have bigger voice. And then I think one of the biggest things that we had in September was our open house. We haven't had an in-person open house since 2019. So it was just really nice to be able to bring everyone back into the building. So that showed our parents and families were able to kind of walk through halls, be able to see what was happening in classrooms, and be able to meet teachers in person. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Jennifer.
So good evening, everyone. John Reed, it's been a very busy place. We have our clubs and activities, and students are here before and after school, involved in all sorts of interests, from Dungeons and Dragons to track and field, you name it, it's pretty much being offered. We have some new faculty joining us soon. So on October 13th, we will have Gabriela Parisi Intiman joining us as a Spanish teacher for grades 5 and 6. She visited one day last week and introduced herself to students, and we're very excited to have her as our full-time teacher. We had socials last week, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, students were having fun and friendship after school, a good time had by all, and we want to thank the PTA for their sponsorship of that. We as well had in-person open house, and we solicited feedback from our attendees. It appears they wanted to hear from the principal and assistant principal. And we decided that we will set up some probably bi-monthly meetings on the topics that were entered by those parents. So there'll be an evening, an hour or so, and we'll advertise those. An example would be school goals and data. And so we'll move through that as well. We have Mrs. Fees received a Fund for Teachers Fellowship and traveled to Mexico, and she made some connections with artists from Mexico. Those artists have been zooming in to our art classes and providing kind of professional feedback to our young artists. It's a very nice initiative. October is Cyber Safety Month, and Mr. Brian Holmes is our Cyber Patriot coach for the competitions. On October 14th, we have 6 teams who will be competing in the middle school Cyber Patriot competition. And there's more in the report, but we have a long agenda. So lots of things happening, and we'll turn it back over.
Great, any
Questions for Jen?
Real quick question. The testing that was done, when do the results come?
So
So the window closes for NWEA, the window closes tomorrow. So after tomorrow, Lori will run reports and they will be sent home to families sometime next week. But we also, if you want to, if families just want to call the teachers can also have those reports immediately as well.
Thank you.
anything? I always try to run off stage. Here I go.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And another Jennifer, our Director of Special Education.
The two big topics for this year are going to be basically CT sets, which I alluded to briefly in my last meeting. It upstate as we go through the IEP format. So it isn't perfect. So we meet weekly with the state on working out the little kinks and the little bugs. But the good news is the parent portal is up and running. So we actually, in order to improve communication with special services and the parent community, we set up a series of workshops with the parents. So we had our first round of workshop the week of September 12th, in which we went to all 4 buildings, and we also ran an evening session to introduce the new IEP format and to introduce them to the new parent portal. We don't want any surprises, so when the document looks a little bit different, even though it covers all of the same topics, we wanted to make sure that we were transparent, making sure that everyone understood that, all of the topics that were discussed at the meeting to also reflect in the documents. The other major topic that comes up is staff. As you know, we have a mandate to support our students, and staffing has been a challenge. But the good news is that we have all of our certified staff in place, and we've been very fortunate. We've been able to start the year making sure we have all our certified teachers in place. We, at this point in time, we only have 1 vacancy, and I think we're very close to filling it in terms of our para support line. I've always said they are the bedrock because they are usually the first person that our students see every day. So we really want to make sure that those supports are in place. So I think we're actually in pretty good shape. We only have 1 vacancy, and we're really looking to fill that. We also had a vacancy in assistive technology specialist. That is what we call a high needs field. We were very fortunate to hire somebody from a neighboring district to join us. And she started this week and she's a rock star. She made a fantastic impression on our students and our staff. So we're very fortunate that we're able to have all of these elements in place.
Couple of questions. The AT specialist, is that shared with Easton?
Hmm?
Is the AT position shared with?
Yes, it is. It's usually shared with Eastern Reading and Region 9. As you know, we had a retirement 2 years ago. She was much loved in the tri-district, and now we have somebody who her background, she is a specialized teacher, which is very nice. She can really connect with our students and our parents and faculty.
The second question, we're about 2.5 months away from having budget conversations in earnest once again. And a topic that's frequently been part of our discussions the last couple of years has been the Junior Bridges program and expanding capacity for it. Currently, with the current enrollment, how does capacity look, and what do you think about that long term?
The Junior Bridge program and the same time. I think that it's doing what we set out for it to do. We did have to expand it, as you know, last year to create what we call each step 1 and a step 2. So I think that I can certainly bring the data, at the next month's meeting.
I'm just curious if we're at capacity or if we have some.
The 2 self-contained classes we have, I would say, are almost at full capacity. The reason why I say that is because we try to limit those to 8 to 9 students because of their needs. The second step program, which is what we call the consultant teacher, which means these students are in the gen ed class with teachers supporting them. We usually try to cap that case to about 12, between 10 to 12. The middle school program runs a little bit differently because we run it like a research room or a contact lab. So I would say that we're almost at capacity. Jen, would you say that we're almost at capacity in the middle school? Or do you have a couple spaces? Yes, we're at capacity, but also with that, we also have we accept the tuition students for that program as well.
That's all.
Jennifer, are you using the new record keeping system exclusively now, or are you running the old system side by side with it at all? You all in on the new system that you
The IP.
yeah.
CT
CT sets.
for CT set.
The CP says, we're doing what we can do. We're pretty much, we have all the support we need, which is really at the state level. But
Is it dual processing right now, or is it totally transit over?
Some people are on the old system, some people are on the new system.
the new system,
Yeah, I was wondering if you're running the old system and the new system side by side, or if you completely transit.
the old system, which we call IEP direct. Any meetings that are not new, they're like new and revised. Sometimes we come back just to revise an IEP. We have to use the old system for that. We only switch over to the new system when it's what we call annual review for the evaluation. Then it gets switched over to the new system. So we are still running the old system.
Okay.
We probably won't discontinue it, I would say probably for another year. And the reason being is because we have the ability to upload all of our documents. So we have maybe 4, 5, even 6 years of evaluation report in what we call the document repository.
Yep.
We don't want to lose that,
Yep.
because that's also what we share when we transition to Region 9.
Right.
So what we do is we should share the students, but we want to make sure that Region 9 has all those documents, but they can continue with the student program. So we are running the 2 systems, but at probably the end of this year, the beginning of next year, the parents only see the new IEP. But on our back end, we probably will continue to see those.
What was the parent feedback like at your meetings?
I think the parents see the promise of the new system. The feedback we've got is they like the idea of the parent portal. They like the idea of getting the IEP almost in real time. So they're getting the documents at the same time that the teachers uploading.
Right.
So to me, there's that sense of transparency that I think that the parent community craves. You know, they want to make sure that they have all the same documents that the school district has. And again, it's all there.
One question, the new hire you mentioned, did Chris, is that AT?
Assistant technology.
Oh,
So, a lot of our students need specialized devices or.
okay, and then did you mention previously that we would see different reporting in our monthly meeting? Sort of like.
Yeah, so we will probably, I mean, you will still get that, but we are in the process of changing the format.
Okay.
I had an administrative assistant, you know, she triggered, she's somewhere else, you're gonna have to bear with me for a little bit.
Sure. Period, okay, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Pearson Hugo is co-presenting with me the student achievement assessment results, but do you have anything?
I'll always provide a preview. So in the days ahead, we are looking forward to opening up a portal for climate information. And this will be a place to find policies and forms, as well as goals and information of data. This is something we began working on last year. And we were not comfortable with the formatting, honestly, of the page. And then a number of other priorities emerged, which sort of pushed it down in line. But we're looking forward to opening up, I would say, most likely in the next week. And they stay tuned.
And that'll be accessible to the family.
It will be on all of our website.
Okay, and finally, our financial report and summary from.
So in your packet, it's the beginning of the year, so financials are a little bit uneventful for spending as one would at the beginning of the year. This
Eventual science.
it sounds good. This is so what I'm passing out to you right now is the healthcare analysis report. This is for July and August. September arrived today, so you don't have that information quite yet. But we are, it's an uneventful report. So let me just say that this healthcare analysis does not reflect, because it's in August, it does not reflect the deposit from the prior year's contribution. So you'll notice that is markedly absent from this report. So that's approximately 800,000 that the board allocated. So you'll see that in the September, that will come in our September bank statement, and we'll reconcile that for September.
This should say 21, 22. All right.
Oh, yes, it should. Right. Thank
The
you.
second to last column should be
The second point that has the wrong date at the top. I'll send everyone a revised copy.
And so the August claim is 474, that's 2 months worth.
That is 2 months worth. You'll also notice that there is, there's actually a credit under claims for $175 from July. So that was a check that came back to us. So I do think, so it is, the way that we get that report, it is 2 months and not just one. And I feel that it's a little bit confusing that it looks like it's a negative 107. It's a credit, so that's why it looks like that. So if you look in that column across under July claims, you'll see that is $175. And it's, with a brief look at this month's claims, we are in that $200,000 range.
What did we didn't have finals for June at our last conference, or back when we made the deposits, all right?
So those, I have June finals and also the deposit, so you'll see that reflected in next month's. It's gonna end up
How did the,
800,000, so it's not here yet.
right, how did the final claims compare to what we budgeted for? 2 reserves?
Looks like it's 2.3 for June of last year.
Do you remember what we were?
You mean total,
What,
total year?
Tell me a
Like-
different. Can you?
I think we
Tell
were
me-
like
tell me a little bit more.
anticipating June was gonna be like 200 to 300 or something like that.
And
Is that right?
Yeah.
And Atlanta, am I remembering that correctly?
I
Okay.
think the only thing that moves is the amount that gets deposited versus the amount that gets refunded to
Yeah.
get us to the balance we're looking for.
Yes, and that the board already voted on. And that money has already been actually deposited to the account. However, that's not, it will not be reflected until this coming
Right,
out statement.
yeah. No, I was more getting at like whether we're gonna start to see the claims trend down.
I don't anticipate that you'll see the trend, that claims will trend downward. Remember this one, the 474,512 is reflective of 2 months.
Right, yeah.
Past 2 years have been average, average monthly claims. Well, that's with admin fees though, 300, and right now we're at 249, so.
Yeah, because it
So
looks, I mean, it looks,
I think we'll be
2
trending.
months in.
yeah,
It's only 2 months in.
Yeah.
So.
We're ahead of where we were after 2 months, the last couple of years, but that's really meaningless.
And the next section is the budget topic summary. I don't know if anyone has any questions there.
There's not, it's the beginning of the year, so that is just the budget that was passed. And all those object codes are all in that budget that is also available up online. So if you had a question about a particular line item and what was included in that, you can refer back to those Google Sheets. And John, I know that you are new. And if you want offline to do a little bit, everybody on the board got a little bit of a deeper dive into how that worked. I'm happy to give you a little overview.
I guess at this point, the only question is whether there are any major, movers in either direction that we're.
There's no overs, there's right at this moment, there is nothing to report.
Anything for you that we're doing right now?
No.
That concludes the administrative reports. Onto board committee reports. Seeing none, we'll find to discussion of possible action. The first item is project pool. Dr. McKinnon, Mr. Maris, would you like to take your words?
Well, we can certainly work together on this, but we're excited to partner with the John Reed Middle School PTA and the development of an outdoor pavilion, I guess you could call it. If you're facing the John Reed Middle School campus, it's over to the right-hand side of the parking lot. I actually saw it the evening before the meeting, and it's an exciting place where students can go outside and kind of learn in a different environment. The ribbon cutting is scheduled actually for next Thursday, October 13th. Over the summer, Jim Caraluzzi and team worked to really get the project over the finish line, so we're grateful to them. And if you're available next week to join the ribbon cutting ceremony, we already have the permit that's been approved, so we're ready to go. Quite exciting.
Several years of hard work by dedicated PTA folks, and then fundraising a little bit help from our across the line.
Yeah.
And the students are already enjoying it. So they're enjoying it before the ribbon's cut because the weather has been perfect for them.
Do they have access to that during lunchtime or just during scheduled classes?
Scheduled classes. So we have a sign out form and teachers can sign it out and use.
Questions or comments? Move on to committee assignments, just a little bit of housekeeping. With John Shanahan joining the board, it will replace Julie Partridge on the Tri-District Food Services Committee. There's a vacancy on the curriculum committee amongst parents, and I'm appointing Amanda Guarneri to fill that vacancy. And I'm also appointing Laura Gibbons to join the facilities. With those, we'll move on to review of standardized test scores. Dr. McKinnon.
We need one more. We have one more. Thank you very much.
So. Let's try this again.
The audience.
Yep, that's the one for you. Actually. Okay. Okay. Chris, are you broadcasting at home? All right, great. All right, so we're pleased to talk about student achievement tonight, along with our district and school goals. Actually, we're kind of merging two items on the agenda in really one presentation. Last year, we presented our scores during the pandemic, and if you recall, our literacy scores declined by approximately 5%, and our math scores declined by 10%, which is really reflective of where we were following the pandemic. And so later on, when you see us present the data, you'll see a gap because we did not test during the 2019, 2020 school year. If you think about the 5-point and the 10-point decline, 1 point is commensurate to about 3 to 4 weeks of instruction. And so if you think about a 5% loss in literacy, that's anywhere a range from 15 weeks to 5 months of lost learning time. And a decline of 10% in math is a decline of, or a loss of learning time of anywhere 30 weeks to 10 months. So we weren't alone in the loss of learning. It's kind of a trend or a phenomena that happened across the country, including our school districts around us as well. So tonight we're going to present multiple data points, including our standardized assessment results, and also including some of our formal assessment results that we use in our classrooms as well. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to deliver this presentation in 3 parts. And so part 1 is really looking at the type of assessments that we provide in schools, our smarter balanced test results, and what formative assessments look like. Part 2, we're going to present our district improvement plan, along with what we consider to be some high impact instructional strategies and some focus areas. And part 3, the school leaders will talk a little bit about their school improvement plans and some action steps that they're undertaking for that work as well. So as I mentioned, student assessment can be really sorted into 2 categories: formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment is really important because it occurs during student learning, and it's used by the teacher to improve student learning while actually taking place. Summative assessment occurs after an episode of learning, and it's intended to summarize how the student did at a particular time. According to research, formative assessment has the greatest impact on student learning because it places the information in the hands of the teacher and the student as learning is actually taking place. And summative assessment falls within the standardized category, and these assessment results define growth and student achievement, usually at the school level, the district level, and it's useful because you can compare those data with other schools and districts around us, which is what we'll do this evening. So this slide, it's difficult to see, but if you're seeing this at home and if you're seeing that on your, by the way, if you have a handout, you can follow along. You can see it on television. But this slide visually demonstrates the scale to which we should devote our time. And we should devote our time more to formative assessments than kind of the widespread accountability assessment. Because formative assessments help students identify strengths and weaknesses and areas for improvement. It provides models for student learning, and it also helps students recognize the impact that their student learning has on kind of the efforts they're taking. So with that, we're going to transition to the next slide on kind of our smarter balanced assessment results. And in this section, we're going to talk about the state administered summative assessments that really define our standardized achievement. So the spring state assessments are really in two major areas. The Smarter Balance assessment look at English language arts and mathematics, and they are administered for grades 3 to 8. And the next generation science standards are administered in grades 5, 8, and 11. I'm really going to highlight the summative assessments. Dr. Pearson, you guys are going to talk a little bit more about the science assessments. So what do the tests measure in English language arts? There are, that's really the domain. And there are 4 claims: reading, writing, speaking and listening, research and inquiry. In mathematics, you're looking at concepts and procedures, problem solving, communicating, modeling, and data analysis. And within each of those claims, you can actually delve deeper into targets. So for example, the claim 1, reading, is that students can read closely and analytically comprehend a range of increasing complex texts. I'm not going to go through all the different claims, but for every claim, they measure a certain area of student achievement. So this slide really talks about how the results are reported to you and to the public. There are 4 levels. Level 1 and level 2 really are students who are below goal. Level 3 and level 4 are those students who meet the achievement standard, and level 4 are those students who are exceeding the learning standard. When we present the results to you in the public, we often refer to the percent of students who are at level 3 and at level 4, which essentially means the students at goal and the students above goal. But we do need to talk about those students who are at level 1 and level 2, and we will talk about kind of what that looks like throughout the presentation. So the next slide really shows our English language arts scores for Eastern Reading and our DERG comparison. And just if you're new to us talking about what a DERG is, a DERG represents other school districts that are like us. It's kind of an older description. It's not really used by the state anymore, but we still refer to it. But these are the school districts like Darien, Buchanan, Ridgefield, Weston, Westport, and Wilton. For this particular graph, again, these are our English language arts scores in grades 3, 4, and 8. Eastern is in red, Reading is in gray, and the DERG average is in blue. You can certainly notice the decline, as I mentioned before, from COVID from 2020 to 2021. But in general, you can see that Eastern increased from 76.7% in 2020, 2021 to 77.2%. Reading remained flat from 2020, 2021 to 2021 to 2023 at 73.9%. And the DERG average is 78.9%. So Eastern School District is about 1% away from the DERG average. The Reading School District in the area of English language arts is approximately 6% away from the DERG average. And just again, a caution, we do refer to the DERG average, but a statistician and a researcher said you use that information with caution because different school districts do different things. They have different resources, and there's a lot of variability in to explain the variance into these results. And so that's an important discussion when we look at resources around the budget time. We'll often compare what other districts have and what perhaps we do not have, or we can make an argument for something, a resource that we may need, and you can compare resources and results loosely, I would say, but these are important points. So if you go to the next slide, this slide shows our math scores in grades 3 to 8. Once again, Reading is in gray, Eastern is in red, the DERG average is in blue. Following the pandemic, the DERG from 2019 to 2021 lost the most ground, so the DERG lost 12%. In Eastern increased from 67% in 2021 to 69% in 2022, approximately 3% growth. Reading increased from 69.1 in 2021 to 71.5 in 2022, which reflects about 2.5% growth. The distance from our DERG neighbours, Eastern is approximately 5% from the DERG average, and Reading is approximately 4% the DERG average in the area of mathematics. Now, Dr. Pearson is going to thrill you with our COLA level data, and then talk a little bit about our science level data as well.
All right. So as I dig into the cohort information, I want you to keep in mind that I'm going to provide the district level lens. So in that way, I will point out what we're seeing in terms of patterns and highlights and lowlights, but also talk about district initiatives that might be in place that would respond. When we get to the point when our school leaders will share more information, they'll talk more about how the schools are digging into this information and their response as well. So when we consider our English language arts performance, our grade 3 students, actually in both districts, Reading and Easton, performed well below where we typically see our third graders performed. And we know a great deal about our own students in Reading in that grade and their varied needs. And so while we wish that score were higher, it is not a complete surprise to us to see that that's the percentage of students that met mastery last year.
That was the cohort we were most worried about in the effects of COVID.
That cohort in our second graders last year, the students who are currently in third grade, those two groups, for probably many different reasons, experienced a struggle last year and the year before. So grade 3 in both districts really performs, as I said, below what we would expect. At the K through 3 level, in terms of the district response, as I shared at the end of last year, we have a much more focused and clarified expectation in the area of phonics instruction during reading. So phonemic awareness in kindergarten and phonics instruction K through 3 is not only laid out in terms of the expectation and the calendar, the scope and sequence of the year, but teachers have been provided with much more specific guidelines about how they should be using their reading block of time to teach phonics. And we've provided teachers with professional development, but also with links to specific resources that state in this unit, these are the phonics lessons that go along with it. We want to be sure that our students have the needed skill mastery in order to make them successful readers. Ultimately, strong readers are comprehenders, but if they cannot code the words, then they will not reach that point of comprehension. So that will be a focus in K through 3. In general, we saw progress, really all except grade 6 in terms of the reading performance. See our grade 4 students in particular, if you look at the cohort progress, from 70 to 83, which is quite an impressive jump. In grades 4 through 8, in terms of district initiatives, while the K through 3 classes will see a greater focus on phonemic awareness and phonics in grades 4 through 8, we're really looking at vocabulary acquisition and grammar structures. So there will be much more focused effort in our classrooms in those areas, really looking at those necessary skills that the students need to develop. We've purchased some new resources for our teachers, and our literacy specialists in both Easton and Reading are working with teachers during team meetings and PLCs to enable them to implement these resources. We're not quite at the point of saying it's a major revision to the curriculum, but they are embedding more grammar and vocabulary instruction in grades 4 through 8. Yes.
Is there something to explain the drop for grade 6 and 8?
There's nothing in particular to explain the drop. There could be more information about that particular cohort of students, but there's nothing that I'm aware of at the district level. It's not a trend that we're seeing or something that we're looking at the district level as saying our response needs to be to look at making a change.
I think the 5 to 6 transition has been a bugaboo for test scores for years. And if you go back pre-pandemic, in purple here, that cohort dropped 3 points. And in green, the most recent 5 to 6 cohort dropped 4 points. It's a consistent pattern. pre-opposed.
And in mathematics in particular, we know that the expectation in terms of the state standards in mathematics, when we moved from 4 to 5 and 5 to this, is pretty significant. So it's not unusual to see it. Okay, moving on to Easton for English Language Arts. As I said, our third graders certainly struggled, and so their performance was not a great surprise to us, but not what we would expect it to be. In general, we're seeing progress in grades 4, 5, and 6, and you can see slight dips there in 7 and 8, but slight dips, not really significant. Okay, moving on to the math data. So as you know, last year we implemented a new mathematics resource at the elementary level. And one of the benefits of that resource is that we've really been able to dig in to the mastery of standards in each unit of study. This resource Envision is much better aligned to the state standards. So our students might be learning a great deal, but if we're not measuring what they're learning, then we're not going to be able to provide that feedback. So because we are better aligned, the hope is that over time, as the students deepen their understanding of math concepts, that will certainly show in their performance. You can see here our performance at the elementary level at 76% and 82% is certainly within the range of what we would hope to see for our students. And then as we look in the 5 to 6 range, it is not yet on par at all with our typical performance. So in addition to knowing the effects of COVID on all of our students, you might remember that when we completed a textbook review at the elementary level, we really quite intentionally did not complete a textbook review at the middle school level at the same time. That would have been a much greater demand for the budget proposal. And so this year, with our math specialists in Easton Reading, we were looking very carefully at our curriculum resources, making sure that our resources, one, represent the best practice in terms of instruction, but also that we are well aligned with the state standards and the expectations. So again, going back to what I said about elementary school, that what we're measuring is actually aligned to what we are teaching in the classroom. So as I said, as students may be learning a great deal, if we're not assessing it, then we're not going to be able to measure those things. Of particular note is the concerning performance in grade 8.
That jumps out.
It does jump out indeed.
It's the only cohort that didn't improve. And it's the last place you'd expect that to happen.
It is.
Do we know whether there's any sort of anomaly to explain that, or?
I'm not aware of any anomalies to explain it. But certainly there have been many conversations between the middle school and the high school with respect to the specific needs of students in that cohort and transitioning them from the middle school to the high school so that the receiving team at Barlow is well aware of the needs and can adjust accordingly.
Has the receiving team noticed deficiencies in that cohort that would sort of corroborate the test scores before?
At this point, I'm not really prepared to share a summary of that. There have been some informal conversations, but I think I'll know more as our meetings continue. Okay. So I think in the future, you will be hearing more information about the possibility of a joint Easton and Reading middle school textbook review and the consideration of a resource that might be better aligned with the standards and would support our curriculum and ultimately our students. And then Easton, thank you.
Talk about Easton next week.
We'll talk about Easton next week. But in Easton, we can see, sorry. You can see a similar story, but we'll move right on. Let's move on to science. Okay. The next generation science standards in grades 5 and 8, our students are also assessed in grade 11. So at the middle school level, since our 5th graders are at the middle school, The middle school level, we used a cross-domain approach to science instruction. So at the time that Easton and Reading adopted the next generation science standards, we had the choice of whether we wanted to provide instruction and content in a single science domain each year. And that is traditionally the way the Easton and Reading curriculum has been laid out historically, or whether we wanted to have a cross-domain approach. We chose a cross-domain approach because life in science is not always aligned to a single domain. In real life, sometimes there is cross-domain, and we also wanted our students to be exposed to all three domains every year so that their entire life science experience is not attached to a year and a teacher, right? So we have a cross-domain approach. The students then have gradual deepening of understanding. So I want to just review briefly the way that the next generation science standards are laid out, which is a little bit different than the Smarter Balanced Assessment. We assess the content through the disciplinary core ideas, and you can see those laid out for you in each of the three domains. And then there are also the science and engineering practices. So those would include questioning, modeling, analyzing data, et cetera. And that goes across all of the domains. And then finally, cross-cutting concepts, and that would include patterns, cause and effect, proportion, scale, and things of that nature. So in terms of our district work, we are looking at greater use of some of the progress monitoring tools that have been made available to us from the state. So in English language arts and in math, we use what are called the interim block assessments. And in science, they have just made available focused interim block assessment. And that will enable the teachers to assess mastery at a much more specific level, and then be able to monitor their instruction accordingly. So if they can see students are really struggling with a particular area of the content or with the practices, then they can get that feedback in real time and then adjust, right? Well before they get to the point, because as Dr. McKinnon shared, the crux of our work is really in the area of formative assessment, teaching and learning. The summative assessment should simply confirm what we already know about our students. So that's work that we will be continuing this year. You can see here our performance in grade 5, gains, and then in grade 8. And so we won't focus on Easton because we're here in Reading, but obviously we will be sharing a different story.
Do you have a story for grade 5? It looks like they've improved significantly from pre-pandemic.
There's no specific story for that cohort of students. I have to imagine that with students being fully in person and experiencing school in a more typical manner, it enables them to make greater gains. And I think science would be an area where they're working closely together, they're doing experiments, it's very hands-on. And so much of our pandemic learning was a little bit sterile, right? We need to keep a certain distance from one another. And so it was harder for the teachers to create the learning experiences where they would really dig in.
Even compared to like 2018, 2019 now, they've improved a lot.
Same curriculum,
Yeah.
same curriculum in both those
Same
years, same
curriculum.
testing method.
The testing method is really the same. So the state has changed only slightly, really moving from paper pencil to an online.
Last year, the first year we departmentalized with grade those, they had a full period of science every day.
Jen split it up in here. So, yeah, so it was compartmentalized. Right, so what that enables is the teacher to become more of an expert in a single content.
Right. And when you had a blended science math, given the emphasis on math, and I suppose I think there tends to be a lead towards more math, less science. So you providing dedicated time.
We get this.
Oh, probably decade ago.
Yeah, wow.
I remember that, right? So again, the state teacher, Rebecca Richards has been a state teacher for, I would say, close to then. It was during the time of Dr. Joseph's work, so that goes back a while.
And the NGSS assessment is still relatively new in the rest.
It is.
Do you have during comparators numbers?
We did not provide group comparison.
I noticed no 8th grade on the science, but I see Easton's 8th grade. Or is that a,
Yes, but I want to draw it right. Like five.
oh, sorry,
Oh, I think the one that's,
well, grade 5, and then,
So our 8th grade,
I got it,
year over year, is
Sorry.
pretty much on par.
I got it.
the match to the one.
That's me. All right. So we'll transition here a little bit. So this slide shows, actually, we're going to go to Reading. So this is Eastern, go advance to the next. Okay, here we go. So this slide demonstrates map subgroup performance for our high need students, and our high need students are defined as students within special education and also who are eligible for English language learner status. Compared to our non-high need students. And this graph really illustrates the relationship between the subgroups. The blue circle is all students combined. The green circle represents, again, our non-high need students, and the orange circle represents our high need students, special education and English language.
X-axis is percentage of students that are above, and Y-axis percent of growth targets met.
Yes, the x-axis is the horizontal axis that demonstrates performance, and the y-axis demonstrates growth. And ideally, you would like to see dots plotted in the top right quadrant, which represents high growth, high performance.
Does special ed include the junior bridges and bridges students as well?
Our June, all students receive an assessment. Some students take the CTAA, which is a different assessment. I would say most students are reflected in that orange dot, but there are some students who take a completely different assessment. Okay.
Are the vertical and horizontal lines averages or goals, or what are those bisecting lines?
So those bisecting lines are just reference points. So you can see here that across the x-axis that reflects high performance, across the y-axis that represents growth.
Are those the 75 lines for both axes?
It could, it doesn't look like it. Well, it could be 75. It could be 75. So the conclusion here, even though this graph is a, it's showing kind of a relationship between the groups, is that we really need to improve our performance for our high needs orange dot, right? Our goal is to move them up and to the right. We need to improve their performance, but also see them growing at a higher rate. And that in turn will impact our blue dot. So when we talk about percent at levels 3 and 4, we also need to consider how these high need group students and where they are. And this is really kind of a, you could look at this as equity, right? We need to make sure that our high need students have the resources and the skills and the instruction to grow as much or more to catch up than our non-high need students. So the next slide shows our English language arts scores. And again, x-axis shows performance, the y-axis shows growth. We're a little bit lower in this quadrant. And we've got to report scores to you at percent above levels 3 and 4, but we also need to report scores and to look at growth and performance for our struggling population and to increase the opportunities that those struggling students have for growth. So this slide is really just to demonstrate where the different subgroups are, and we're going to delve more into how we address specific actions related to these groups in later slides. Okay. So if you thought the next slide was quite busy, this slide is even busier. In the top right-hand quadrant, we've talked about the percent of students at goal, and above goal, which would be in the green and the blue areas. So for mathematics, we have 29% in the goal area and 43% in the above goal area. That means we have 9% at level 1 and 19% at level 2 in the area of mathematics. In the area of ELA, we have 32% in the green, 42% in the blue, 10% in the red, and 16% in the yellow. So that shows the bands that our students are located within. And we really have to look at the students in the red and the yellow and move them to the green. That is how you improve your scores at percent at goal, right?
This is currently.
This is current. Well, these standardized results were were from May last year. Okay.
Is it typical to
Hey,
see most students in
Yeah.
level
Last
one?
week.
Last year.
Yeah.
Oh,
This,
okay.
this really, no, I mean, when you look at where our students fall when they take an assessment, it is typical to see students in red, yellow, green, and blue. But as leaders, we need to look at where those students are, know who they are, and know exactly what they need to grow. So I'm just pointing out to you, what you see at the front level of this presentation is kind of a very high level view of kind of how we compare to the dirt. But we go deeper. And we look at kind of the percent in each band. Okay, now I want to draw your attention to the bottom part of that slide, which looks at the performance distribution. Here we're looking at grade 6 reading. So I'm looking at one area, and there's a performance distribution in grade 6 reading, where the performance levels are analyzed in 3 categories. Students approaching a standard, students below standard in red, students approaching standard in yellow, and students above standard in green. So if you look at reading, which is what we're looking at, you see target 1, target 10, target 11, and target 12. What we do at the school level is to delve deeper into those targets. So target 11 is actually the standard that looks at how information is presented within and across texts, events, and ideas. And if students can determine how information is, or an author's purpose or point of view. So we actually look at, can students across multiple texts determine the author's point of view? That is a specific skill. And they're either below standard, approaching standard, and above standard for that particular skill. Right? And our strategy is to know students who are below, students who are approaching, for specific targets, and to move them into the above standard category. Right? So this slide just shows you that we delve deeper, right? We delve deeper into the standards and the skills, right down to the skill level. And we need to know how students are doing according to each skill and where they fall, whether they're below, approaching, or above, and how we can move them further, right? So I'm sorry that slide's a little complex, but that is kind of how we delve deeper into the data. If you go to the next slide, here's just some summary, some key points. We need to target classroom instruction and student support according to performance level, right? So the percent below, approaching, and above. We need to determine student growth and project the point at which students are going to be above level. If you look at the picture in the top right-hand corner of that slide, or if you're looking at your handout, it shows grade 3 students, and it shows the point at which they're going to experience growth each year, and whether that growth is going to get them into the green zone or not. And so when we look at growth, students have different growth rates, and we can look at whether they're making enough growth and making adjustments and in terms of support. The greater support that we have for those students who aren't at goal and helping them grow faster, the more students we have at levels 3 and 4. And finally, the other point that I would make is number 3, which is we need to deliver instruction and develop skills at the claim and target level. So in the previous slide, I gave you an example of what a target is. It's a very focused skill. You can kind of see on that, so we're on the next slide. Sorry, yeah, you can see here in that target, right? The outer ring is the domain, the inner blue is the claim, and the bullseye is the target. And if we teach skills, if we teach students at the skill level, we're going to accelerate their progress. So that's really kind of the student assessment side. If you move to the next slide, we're going to get into district goals and school goals. So the first part of this presentation was really the data. The second part is what are we doing about the data, right? And congratulations, you made it through the first part of this. Okay, so district and school goals should be focused on student achievement. We need to determine what metrics measure student achievement and the best goals to develop around those metrics. I've seen too many district improvement plans collect dust in a binder on a shelf, right? Cumbersome plans are the equivalent of a chicken that's lost its head. Faculty are running in different directions. We're working harder. We're not working smarter. We've only pockets of success to show for it. So if someone hands you a binder and says, this is your district improvement plan, I want you to think that's the chicken, okay? Because that's not how you're going to really improve student learning. Student learning will not progress unless plans are really precise, they're agile, and they're flexible. So our goals, which we'll show you in a moment, are captured in a Google Sheet, and they're subject to change. Our goals should not be static, right? But we should be focused on our goals, and the reason why they're in a Google Sheet, not a binder, is because hopefully we can change our goals and we can change our action steps. We know when we're going to hit a certain level of success, and we can make adjustments. So I'll show you that in a moment. And finally, return to the chicken example for a moment. If you have too many goals, you have none, right? So imagine if I let a chicken in here and I said to Mike, I want you to capture the chicken. I'm sure he could catch the chicken, but if I let two chickens in the room, you'd catch none. Maybe you'd catch two. So I won't talk any more about the chicken, but really my point is that, right, we really want to have a few number of goals rather than too many. And so let me just talk about the difference. If you go to the next slide. During our convocation board meeting, we mentioned that our intent at the end of this month is to focus our strategic priorities. Strategic priorities are not what we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about tonight are really quality instruction. And so quality instruction comes from high impact instructional strategies, goals and metrics, professional development and training. The yellow circle and the green circle are really what we're presenting later in the month. Our priorities are actions and strategies, they're resources and investments. Our values are from our culture and our climate and from our stakeholders. All right. So the next slide, we've tried really hard to align our district and school priorities. A district improvement plan is primarily driven by the superintendent and the central office team. A school improvement plan or a SIP is driven by the school level. And all of these things have to be really tightly aligned, the district goals, the school goals. And if you can even align teacher goals to these things, then you have really good overlap. And that is how you kind of align and build coherence at district. All right. So that's what we're trying to do when we share with you our DIP, our SIP, and our teacher goals. So the next slide, these are our district goals. District goals are focused in three main areas. The first area is high impact instructional strategies. We have two goals focused on student achievement, which is 2A and 2B. And then finally, we have a third goal focusing on family engagement and climate. So the first area, I've discussed high impact instructional strategies with you in the past, but I haven't really gone deep into that area. These high level strategies are researched to demonstrate improvement in student learning. And we want to be able to see these high leverage activities in our classrooms. And so that teachers understand their importance and that we all are collectively growing in these areas. So I'll talk more about those in a moment. Our student achievement in two parts, achievement as measured by standardized assessment and by formative assessment. And finally, our third goal is focused on family and school engagement and climate. And we deeply care about how we interact with families, and each school has developed an action plan around those areas. So the next slide before delving into high impact instructional strategies, I want to talk to you and give you some background. We have very skilled teachers in our classrooms, and we have really highly competent leaders. There are so many levers that we can pull in education. It's so important to pull the right lever at the right time. And research tells us that the modern day classroom is pretty effective at what we're doing. Our goal is that students demonstrate a year's worth of growth in each year. However, 95% of what our teachers are doing in the classroom can be rated as effective. What we have to do is think about what are the most effective strategies that we can pull and use at any one time. So if you look in the top right-hand corner, we have a barometer, or almost like a graph that shows a zone of effective or effect sizes. Researchers have used the effect size value to describe the impact on student achievement over time, right? So if you look across the top of the circle, you'll see -0.2, 0.1, 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, all the way around to 1.2. A small effect size is something around 0.2. A medium effect size is something around 0.4, and a larger effect size is greater than 0.4, around 0.8. Okay, so for example, homework. Okay, you've all battled homework at times at home as parents. Homework has an effect size of 0.29. So if you look at the barometer there, the effect of homework on student achievement is low. If we were going to visit homes and we were going to talk with families and students at home, researchers have identified home visits has an effect size of 0.29. Summer school, if you send your child to summer school, it only has a small effect on student achievement. Summer school has an impact of 0.23. Technology, I'm sorry to say, Mr. Garfani, technology by itself
No good.
only has an effect size of 0.2. We know that we use technology in different ways, but if we said we're only going to expect students to learn by technology, you would understand that it has a small effect size. However, summarizing information has an effect size of 0.6. Response to intervention, which is the interventions we provide to students when they're struggling, has an effect size of 1.29. And the highest effect size is collective teacher efficacy, which is 1.59. But if you look at the bottom side of that graph, simply what I'm saying to you is that we mostly do things in the yellow zone, according to that bell curve. And what we need to do is shift the yellow to the green, right? And simply identify the strategies that are highly effective and spend more of our time focusing on those things. And we're going to talk about what those things are right now. John, you had a question?
I answered it myself.
Okay, great. So once again, if 95% of what we do in classrooms are effective, but different things have a different impact on student learning, what are the really highly impactful strategies? These are the highly impactful strategies. These are the areas that would fall into the green area of the bell curve, right? Learning intentions has an effect size of 0.75. That is, a learning intention is a statement of what students are expected to learn in a given lesson, right? So we're very clear to students to say you're expected to learn this at the end of this lesson. That has an impact on student learning. If you pair learning intentions with success criteria has an impact of 0.88. And success criteria means that we're providing for students a gauge for what they're expected to learn. So we say to students, you're expected to learn this by the end of the lesson, and this is how you measure your progress towards that learning target. That has an effect size of 0.88. Feedback, meaning if teachers provide feedback according to that learning intention and that success criteria, that has an effect size of 0.7. Classroom instruction. If we have deep, meaningful classroom instruction, that has an effect size of 0.82. And so that's really important to increase active engagement. And higher order thinking sizes doesn't have really an effect size, but we can essentially increase critical thinking in students by the types of questions that we ask. So it's really important to provide training in higher order thinking questions. Okay. So that's goal number one. And you'll see here that we have specific action steps to focus on these high impact instructional strategies as part of our goal. And the principals also have high impact instructional strategies in their set as well. The next area is student achievement. 2A is focused on standardized achievement. In Reading, we're saying that by 2023, we want 77.5% of our students in grades 3 to 8 to meet or exceed goal. That's a broad goal. When you talk about what we anticipate to be a level of improvement in a wide band of students grades 3 to 8, a realistic goal is anywhere between 1 to 3%. When you talk about the growth of a particular grade level, you can increase that number, right? So our goal is to increase reading to 77.5%. In math, by June 2023, we want 75% of our students to read or exceed goal. And our science scores, we want 77% of our grade 5 students and 75% of our grade 8 students to meet or exceed goal at the next generation of science standards. On average, that's a range between 2.5 and 3.5% in that area. You'll hear the leaders in a moment talk about their individual grade level goals, which will show different levels of growth, much higher.
So this is an average across all grades.
This goal is for an average across grades 3 to 8. And then you'll see specific goals for each grade level in the set. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but there are tools that we're going to use to break apart the standards that I talked about and to train teachers in using these tools so they're more effectively focused on skills in the classroom. And the next slide. And this slide just shows Dr. Pearson, you mentioned the idea of using an interim block assessment. That is just taking a collective group of standards and focusing on those standards at one time. So if you go to the next slide, there are tools where we can actually build our own assessments. So we can identify a particular maths assessment, we can drill down to a particular claim, and we can build our own assessments that measure standards. So if we're concerned about a set of standards, we can actually go in and teach those standards and design our own assessment around them. So we need to do that throughout the year, multiple times. And so one of our action steps, as we'll see in a moment, will actually show that.
What is the screenshot of?
That screenshot is of an assessment tool where you can build an assessment that measures specific targets.
Okay, and this is something that like all the staff have access to.
That is something that we need to make sure we train teachers in how to do.
Okay, but it will be, yeah.
So this will be an action step. I'm just kind of showing you a
Yeah.
visual picture of what an action step would be. Okay, so goal 2.2b, this is really formative assessment and student achievement. And we're really focusing on a few different areas here for formative assessment. Elementary reading, it's Funnels and Canal. We're setting targets at 80% in grade levels. Elementary writing, we're using on-demand writing assessments in narrative, opinion, information. We intend to develop models, score ongoing formative assessments, and provide opportunities for students to focus on that genre throughout the year. We're going to be using our formative and summative measures using Envision. Dr. Pearson Hugo talked about using our new math program, Envision, and how we can use that information formatively. I'll show you a slide of that in a moment. Middle school reading, we're looking at growth according to the NWEA. We're looking at middle school writing, which is also narrative and argumentative genres. And we're also looking at students meeting their math scores at NWEA as well. Again, these are our internal formative measures. Go to the next slide, which is a really busy slide as well. But really the takeaway from this slide is that this is a sample of our formative assessments and the data we can pull out of Envision. And what that means is we can provide a unit of assessment and we can assess students after each unit and determine, are they in the green? Are they in the yellow? Are they orange? What percent are they making progress towards a specific standard? And then we can drill down to that standard, right? So the point is that the reason why formative assessment is so powerful is that we can do this every unit, right? If you only focus on summative assessment, which is only given once a year at the end of the year, it was given in May, but we're talking about it now in October, that's not going to improve student learning. So this will increase collaboration, it will increase differentiation, and it will increase the success for which we can provide interventions to students who aren't in the green. And finally, not finally, sorry, I know you're wishing finally, but the next slide is what Dr. Pearson, you guys mentioned earlier. We're about to show what our family and school climate goals and data are. But this is kind of some snapshots of our school climate dashboard. On the left is a picture of our school climate webpage, which will show our safe school climate plan. And on the right is a visualization that we're going to show for all questions related to climate. Ms. Grafani, over the past couple of weeks, has really been building our this visualization dashboard. And it's a really transparent way for students, for the community to delve into our climate data. So we want to share this with everyone. But if you go to the next slide, we're not going to focus on all 30 questions, 40 questions of the climate. We're going to focus on just a couple of areas. So family engagement goal is by spring 2023, 9% of parents will know how their child is doing before they receive a report card. We thought that was a very good focus area because it increases communication between teachers and parents about what progress students are making. We've got 2 climate goals. By the spring 2023, 90% of students will be able to identify trusted adults in their school to whom they can reach out for help. And the final goal is really focused on kindness in schools and believing that students are, they're in part of a kind environment. And so our goal there is 90% of parents will report that their students believe that that their schools are kind. Okay, so those are our goals. And this next component of the presentation is really just the actual dip itself. And I don't have a handout for you on this. And so what I will do is I'm going to show you the dip and what it looks like.
Jason, will you transition to that? How would you respond to somebody who listened to this presentation and said, that sounds like a lot of tests? And it feels like it's all about assessing in a world where sometimes it feels like it's overwhelming.
Well, we're not giving them any more assessments. We're actually using the assessment smarter. So we're giving the formative assessment. Your child is in grade 4. They take an assessment at the end of a unit on fractions. We're looking at the information on that fraction unit, and we're delving into what strengths and weaknesses they have. And if a student has some weaknesses in fractions, we're going to take those students, we're going to put them in a smaller group, we're going to provide an intervention for those students, we're going to make sure they know those skills. And so it is a lot of information on student assessment because the presentation is on student data. But our action steps, I'm going to show you the action steps right now, really are focused on what are we doing with the data, right?
So if the data is used well, teachers will capture more instructional time because the lag is when the only assessment data are summative. And so the teachers are potentially in lockstep with all students in a full class and then only confirming understanding at the end of the unit. But if formative assessment data informs instruction, then the hope is that differentiation will be more effective in the classroom and then more time is captured. That's certainly the hope.
So this is our dip. And it's hard to see on a small TV, but here are some essential elements. The front page talks about kind of our focus areas, and it has the links to each of the school plans right there. So you can click right on it. The tabs across the bottom are for certain areas. So there's a tab for district data, it shows what our data is. The first tab is our priority 1 goal. Our priority 1 goal, as I mentioned before, are high impact instructional strategies. So you can see here we have a key strategy and a rationale. This is our learning intentions, right? So tab 1 across the bottom shows high impact instructional strategies. Tab 2 across the bottom reflects the goals that I just mentioned to you in improving student learning as measured by these standardized assessments. 2B reflects the formative assessment data and our goals related to those areas for our schools. Priority 3 is really looking at the goal for our family engagement and our school climate. And for every goal, you see the goal, the measurement, and the baseline. So it shows where we were and how we're getting there. And then this is really the most important tab. The action steps, again, which is a tab that's right on the bottom of the sheet, shows our program, our intended actions for each of the 3 areas. So these are the action steps related to high impact instructional strategies. So if I shared what the first one is, develop a common walkthrough tool and look for classrooms. Who's responsible for that? And what are the evidences of the evidence of success? Another goal, 1.3, right here. Promote teacher clarity by developing a list of learning intentions and success criteria across grade levels and content areas. Okay, again, who's responsible for that and when is it going to be done? 1.6 is another one. Conduct several learning walks to collect data in schools, measure growth and implementation of learning intentions and success criteria. So we're going to design a tool, we're going to train teachers on what it is, we're going to go into classrooms and collect data on how we're doing in that particular area, right? And so for each goal, there are action steps. So what's an action step we're doing under goal number 2? The district will create an interim block assessment schedule and collaborate with each school. The district will identify needed resources in collaboration with building leaders to improve student learning, and so on. So for every action, for every goal area, we have specific actions, including family engagement and student learning. So getting back to the presentation, that is our dip. Are there any questions about the tool itself and how we're trying to organize, how we're capturing all those goals and action steps? Yes, John?
Is this something that you came up with, or where did this come from?
Well, this, the tool I came up with, but this isn't, school districts have goals, they have action steps. And some of the action steps the district has done for quite some time. And we all collaborated on developing the goal together. And it's just a matter of putting it all together in one place. So this will be our workplace, right?
Well, I mean, the model itself had to come from somewhere. You fine-tune it for your district.
That was recent.
Yeah, well, the high impact instructional strategy comes from research and education. The focus on standard achievement comes from looking at student achievement in the areas of standardized and formative measures. And the focus on family engagement and school climate comes from our climate data that we administer each year. So those things that come from those places, the action step related and the design a little bit comes from all of us, right? In terms of how we kind of how we're going to allocate our time and resources and actions to address those areas.
I noticed in the dip, there's sort of a mid-year check-in expectation. How do you intend to sort of measure this over the course of the year and maintain pace with your goals?
The area on high impact instructional strategies, for example, is first we designed a tool. So when we walk into classroom, we're looking for success criteria, feedback, learning intentions. And do we see those things or not? And what extent do we see them? We evaluate them according to a 3 or 4 point Likert rubric. And when we go into the first time, we collect data, that's our baseline. Our goal is, as a leadership team, is to go into all of our schools. So I don't want to just go into Reading Elementary School. All of our leaders across all of our districts, including our leaders from Eastern, we're all going to go into Reading Elementary School, and we're going to use the same tool to look at classroom performances in those particular areas. So we're actually going to have more data than mid-year. We'll do this frequently. We'll do it 4 or 5 times, and so we'll see growth over time. And the goal is we'll start off, and we will probably be at 50 or 60% of teachers have clear learning intentions that the students are aware of. And we want to grow that to 80% in that particular area, because we know that has a high impact on student learning.
How do the teachers feel about this part of this?
Last year, I went to all schools and did professional development about kind of what these high impact instructional strategies are. And explained to them that we're going to be doing some walkthroughs in these areas. And at the end of last year, we started at Helen Keller Middle School. And our intent is to start this work in each of our schools pretty soon. Our first step was obviously articulating the DIP to you, and I know our school level leaders are articulating the DIP to each of them, at their faculty meetings as well. It's important to know that we are not, when we go into a classroom, we're not collecting individual data on that teacher because it's not disaggregated. The information is only seen at a high level. So we're not collecting information on Mrs. Jones in grade 3. We're really looking at how is the school and Reading doing in a particular area, right? And our goal is to collectively increase performance. If you recall, when I showed you this slide, I said the highest impact you can have, according to research, it's called teacher collective efficacy. It's 1.57. And what that means is that teachers understand individually what impact they're going to have on student learning. But if we all understand, have the same understanding about what that impact is, and we all work together, that's the greatest impact on student achievement, right? Which is 1.57. So we were just at this point here, and now we're going to talk about our student improvement plans. Our leaders are going to come up and talk a little bit about their goals. I can start off by saying right from the beginning that it's high impact instructional strategy is the same in the DIP as it is in the DIP. The student achievement and student achievement area 2B and 2A and 2B are also the same. They're slightly different goals, but goal 1 and goal 3 are identical, right? And that's deliberate because we want to have coherence. We're all working towards the same thing. So first, we're going to have Melissa and Ken come up and talk to us about the first goal.
Sorry, just as far as how heavy the lift is to get everyone on board, is there a lot of professional development time that needs to go into this, or is it something that you expect to be simple?
Actually, since you asked, Sharad, let me show you one more feature plan. Okay, again, I know that's hard to see. I can barely see it across the bottom. You've got the different goals: goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, action steps. There's a tab that says faculty meetings and department meetings at the bottom. And what this does is it identifies when all this work is going to take place. So we're going to deliver this to our teachers in chunks, right? It's not like we're going to, even though I gave them an overview last year, you'll see there at each of those faculty meetings that each of the schools are going to say, during the month of October, we're going to come in and teach you this small piece. And so this, to your point, this is an important area. We all need to spend some time on that. And so we're trying to articulate how we're going to, or where this learning is going to take place. Okay, and here we go.
So as Dr. McKinnon just shared, our school improvement plan is very much aligned to the district improvement plan. While we have smarter balance goals, similar to the district improvement plan, and our other focus areas include F&P for our reading. So we expect a percentage of students to be at an instructional level by the end of the school year. And then our TC writing prompts, very similar. And then also we are using Envision's math benchmark C as one of our other goals in the area of mathematics. So even though our percentages may be a little different than the district improvement plan based on cohorts of students. Everything is perfectly aligned. So when we look at this data, I think the biggest question is, what are we going to do with this information? And, you know, not one of the best things about being able to start and running last year mid-year, even though it was crazy to start as a building principal in a new school mid-year, is that you get to see the processes, procedures, practices, everything working in place before deciding you're going to make any changes. And so there was a lot of great things that are already happening at RES. And so we also know that it's a lot harder at times to go from good to great. So just looking at our current practices and how we utilize our time is really important. And so one of the things that I noticed when I first came to RES was there wasn't enough time for those PLC, professional learning communities, during the school day. So over the summer, Mr. Amodio and myself, we revamped our entire school schedule to allow grade level teams to have weekly PLC. So there's time. Once a week, every grade level meets for a 45-minute block to have professional learning opportunities. Be analyzing new learning, but we also use that time to look at data and to make informed decisions about students and instruction. And we kind of look at common themes and where we need to go. In addition to that block of time, every about 6 to 8 weeks, we have what we call SIT meetings, which are in essence is SRBI or RTI, how we meet the needs of our students through tiered intervention support. So during those initial meetings for our initial PLCs, our priority was to kind of develop norms, just, you know, what are expectations during those meetings? How do we look at data? How do we value each other's opinions, and how we make decisions together? And so it's been great. It's been a nice time for us to really gather, to look at that data and to analyze our process. We also have spent a good amount of time last spring and also into the summer, just kind of, we already have a really robust SRBI process, but we are now emphasizing more on that tier 1 best practice. Classroom teachers really looking at student need, and the classroom teacher also providing targeted instruction to support students who are struggling.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, through that process, you know, we have a simple tracker so that teachers can follow and support students that are in tier 1 that might need a little bit of differentiation, that they may not have done that clear before. And so that's something that we're working with them on now. It's that when they come to a meeting, it's very targeted and specific what we're looking at and how we're going to be supporting them in the classroom, and then also when you go into tier 2. So that process has definitely been refined using some of those forms with teachers.
So more of that intervention taking place in the classroom before students get that additional support by a reading specialist or a math specialist outside of the classroom. You know, in regards to Sba, Dr. McKinnon did show a screenshot that I think Laura, you asked, you know, where did the screenshot come from? That's specific to tools for teachers. That is work that actually we started to engage in last year with our 3rd and 4th grade teams, going through the platform, because what Sba does really nicely, and Dr. McKinnon had this screenshot up, what is that it really analyzes claims and targets. And so that information is so valuable because we look at universal dips across the grade level. So if I'm looking at a 4th grade target and we're noticing that all 4 classrooms have students who are struggling with a specific target, we start to look at supplemental resources, curricular resources, instructional strategies, best practices to support an overarching need. And then in addition to that, if we're noticing that specific students are having dips in their data, how do we meet those students' needs? That's pretty targeted.
Yeah. So then the tools for teachers can also provide lessons for teachers. So it's not just about assessments. You can actually go in and put in what your claim and target is that you're struggling with, and it will provide you with lessons. So it gives teachers an opportunity to use those lessons to be able to teach that in their classroom. So they have a targeted way of doing that. And we have been meeting with teachers probably over the last 2 weeks to develop their student learning objectives for the school year. And part of that conversation and that work is going over our school improvement plans, sharing our goals with teachers, because we want them to align their student learning objectives with our SIP that also supports the DIP. SIP DIP, I feel like you want to like bust out. So a lot of that conversation that we've been having is that alignment. Teachers have we started having these conversations about what their goals will look like. And our emphasis again is their action steps. So how do their action steps align with our action steps as a school? And I will say everyone has selected at least one high impact instructional strategy to focus on. We've talked to grade level teams. Some grade level teams are deciding to pick one area of focus. And so during our PLC time, we're going to be doing some types of book studies, article reviews, so that we can really dive into the research, but also provide the staff with that PD opportunities as well. And so it's really nice to see the alignment, because as we shared with our staff, you know, regardless of your goal for students, you're going to engage in all of the work because it's part of our actions to improve test scores, but also to support our learners. No, I think that we've had some really good conversations around the slow development, which are their goals, and talking about those and strategies, and teachers are kind of coming together a little bit and wanting to learn a little more about questioning techniques or just getting good feedback. So I think we have some really good conversations that we just started with that. So we're, you know, as administrators, we'll be able to support them with more research on that, you know, with research on Hattie books and things like that. So things that are going to really support their work when they start delving in.
And what I was able to link to our particular set is we have a PLC calendar. So teachers are aware of what the purpose of every PLC meeting is going to be, but then also all the new learning, we attach all of our norms. So it's become not only a calendar per se, but also a resource for staff as well. And a share, yeah, and we've also recently created a shared drive that houses all of our new learning documents, communications too, which has been really supportive to our teachers in their work. And then, you know, the family and student engagement piece, you know, something that when I first came to RES last year and I started meeting with families, we were still meeting virtually. We couldn't really have people in the building. So a lot of the feedback that I received is just, you know, that engagement piece of being able to be present and into RES again has been really welcoming. So, you know, we started doing parent universities tagged on to our PTA meetings. You know, for example, last month, Mr. Farina, our advanced learning opportunity instructor, he came in and he did a whole presentation on advanced learning opportunities. Parents were able to ask questions in advance. Everything is recorded and live streamed on Facebook. This month, we are actually going to be talking about SRBI and how students receive interventions and supports and how we make decisions to kind of just educate families on the tiers in our process. We always have our Rocky Weekly Roundup, which is a wealth of information that moves home every week. This year, as I mentioned earlier, this evening, we are implementing student council.
Yeah, so we wanted to give an opportunity for leadership work and for students to have a voice. We really want them to be able to, they've already come up with a few ideas of how they want to improve RES. So the ones that have filled out an application, we have, I think, I just checked, we have about 20 kids so far. And this is the last week for them to sort of sign up and we're going to get started with that very soon, but they're going to have a little bit of a voice and be able to work on some projects to improve RES and share with us some of their ideas. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then they're going to help us lead assemblies and just take on more of those, working on those leadership skills that we want them to develop when they get to middle school. So I'm excited about that opportunity to run that with them and learn to go.
Yeah. And then recently, just this month,
we started an initiative called RAS Read. Some feedback that we had gotten last year from our school climate was just kind of a disconnect between our social and emotional learning program, second step, and the communications, going home and that kind of partnership. So over the summer, some teachers and myself took on a project of 4 times a year. There's 4 themes and second steps that during each theme cycle, a particular book will be going home that's aligned to that theme, just kind of enforce that SEL, literature, and kind of that homeschool connection as well. So we're doing a lot of great things to kind of partner with families, invite families in, whether it's lunch buddies for kindergarteners and first grade, to the Halloween house is coming back this month. So a lot of those, initiatives and fun things that we didn't have are all coming back. So I'm hoping that also supports that engagement. My kids have been asking about that already. Yeah.
So, how realistic do you feel that such a lofty goal, 11% jump for women's sports? Is it realistic, or is this just
it is a lofty goal. I think Dr. McKinnon kind of touched upon it, that when we do create goals, try to be as realistic as possible with a small percentage. I mean, ideally, we would like to be at least aligned with the DERG, but we'll do our best. And I think that, with a lot of the new systems and processes and structures and new learning for staff, and us too, I do hope to see a jump there as well.
So you feel like it's a realistic goal? Achievable.
It could be achievable. Anything's achievable. We hope so. We hope so.
Did you look back at pre-COVID data for those years and calibrate the goals against that also, or just look at the 22 DERG average?
Yeah, we just looked at the averages from the 21, 22 to try to kind of create more of like a realistic cohort average.
I mean, I guess if we were never at the DERG average in the first place, I don't know why that would be the goal instead of restoring back to where we were before.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So the data that we looked at, the standardized testing, started with grade 3 last year. That's your grade 4 this year. What do we know about your current grade 2 and current grade 3? These are students that had a kind of almost didn't know what pre-pandemic schooling was like. What do we know about those low grades right now?
So we talked a little bit, I think even last year, about that second grade cohort that's currently our third grade cohort. And as you all know, we went from 5 sections to 6 sections to make that class size smaller, because we did see student need in regards to interventions and supports. Those interventions and supports are still going on. Those are still practices that we're doing. We are seeing that just in regards to behaviors and some student need, having students in the 6 sections now has helped tremendously. In regards to our current second grade class, we've already started talking about in regards to just kind of budget, will we be looking to also add another class section to spread out students again, to have that smaller class size so that we could ideally separate students, but also, be able to provide those interventions and supports in a smaller class setting.
Because I feel like I hang on to this and I say, okay, well, here's what happened during the pandemic, and we're gonna recover from here. But I don't think I don't think we can say that, because I think that there's lagging information that's going to come on, and I don't want to be surprised by it next year when 2 hits 3, or this year's third grade.
It'll be 2 years of who knows what's coming.
Just right.
Just to kind of go back to the point I made before about the binder approach to here's your school improvement plan. We do want to have a mid-year focus on what's our progress, right? And so we have different benchmarks throughout the year. We may have to adjust one, right? An 11% improvement in grade 3. Hard to predict where those students are because they did miss, to your point, they missed some education. But if we are looking at their other internal assessments, which we intend to use more effectively, then we can make an adjustment in a few months about that goal, and it may stay where it is, or we may have to adjust it and ratchet it down by a couple of percentage points.
We were just having similar conversations with teachers regarding their slopes, right? So they come up with percentages based off of some of our beginning of year data, but we know, for example, like F&P is only given 3 times a year. We wouldn't expect teachers to all of a sudden, mid-year, oh, I gave the F&P again, and oh my goodness, I need to adjust my goal. There's progress monitoring, there's running records, there's other ways teachers assess during that window of time to kind of guide that decision making. So when we get to here, we're not going to only make changes potentially in percentages based off of just F&P, but we'll have other data points to kind of support those changes as well. So it's very fluid.
As we move forward and think about those things, I think it's important that we look at program 2 as well, because I think, remember last year when we were talking about the budget, we opted to not lower that class size and we kept it in 2022. And I think one of the things that we cautioned against was ending up in the same situation where we have that 3rd grade cohort that's struggling. So I think that's important that we look at and identify before we go into this budget too.
Yeah, and we started those conversations with thinking like, okay, our current 4th grades, we have 4 sections, our current 3rd grade is at 6 sections. So we're going to continue that 6 section, but do we also want to have another section in 2nd grade as well to decrease the class sizes for the upcoming 3rd grade? So that's all been on kind of our radar as well.
Okay, would you like to hear from John Reed Middle School? Please. Okay, lovely. Any final questions from Linda and Kim? All right, thank you.
So the learning intention that I was given was we'll have 5 or 6 minutes.
Right.
That's not really a learning guide.
Which we know.
That's a hard fast rule.
Well, let's see how we do. So you will see we've listed the priority goals. These are the standardized test goals, right? And Kyla and I, we tend to think big. You'll see it's like a 4 or 5% increase. That's robust, but we do think it's doable. And I'll reference what Chris said earlier. It's not about the test. If there's good teaching going on in the classroom, the test results will follow. And that's kind of something I want students to recognize. Students, as a classroom teacher, would always say, Mr. Merrick's, what do I need to know? I'm like, no. You just show what you've done. It's my job to take that information and then tailor my instruction to help you do better. And that's really the approach. That's what we're trying to do. And to help everyone kind of reframe, hey, it's about this at the end. Yeah, this is summative. So that's going to be pretty big. That's your season ending batting average. That lets you know if you're going to get that bonus salary. But really, it's about the process of getting there. And that's what we're going to do and emphasize with the teachers going through. So, we go through 5% across the board. And looking at cohorts of students, we think it's doable. And we think we have the folks in the building to make it happen. So, a few focus areas. I'm going to have Kyla talk really about the PLC, data teams, and SRBI. Because in place, we have weekly data meetings at the team level, grade level teams. And these folks are going through data analysis and using protocols, student work, formative assessments to help target instruction and using our win period. I don't want to steal everything. So let me know, but you go from there.
So, yeah, as Jen said, we started a couple of weeks ago, even before NWEA, where we started meeting as grade level teams. And so what we're looking at is we're starting off with the NWEA, which gives us like an overview of this is kind of how our students are doing. But our data analysis every single week is authentic student work. So classwork, homework, observation, that in the classroom. And so they're bringing that to those data meetings and we're looking at that. Are they meeting the learning objectives? Are they meeting the success criteria? If they're not, let's put in some tier 1 interventions. Let's try that for the next week. Come back and tell me how your student did. Did it work? Great. Let's move on to the next one. Did it not work? Okay, what's our next intervention that we're going to try? And we keep that cycle over and over again. If it gets to the point with a student that they're not making progress with the tier 1 interventions, we go to tier 2, which is during our win time. That's targeted teacher tier 2 intervention that's supported by myself and our specialists going in and helping teachers to do small group targeted interventions. And we tried that as well.
What is win?
When is what I need. So it's what I need. It was put in place. Every student in the school has a win period. So they're working with the teacher on what I need. And it's based on that data. Eventually, we want students to be able to identify what they need. We're not there yet. We have to identify it for them. But we'll get there with them. Because in a perfect world, I want a student to be able to come up to a teacher and say, teacher, this is what I don't understand. This is what I do understand. This is where I need you to help me. Because then that takes a lot of kind of the time off of the teacher because the student can metacognitively understand that as well, which in Hattie's effect size has a over 4-point effect size. So we do those targeted interventions. If those still aren't working, similar to the elementary school, we then go into a student intervention team. And that puts us at a high level tier 2, tier 3, which is part of our SRBI process that we're actually rewriting right now and this year as well to make it much more streamlined so that teachers understand that process and what it looks like through each of the interventions, how long they should use each intervention and what they should be doing and when within each intervention. So we can find students and get them quicker and target their instruction better.
So we'll go to the next one, and that's the claims and targets with the Sba testing. And again, yep, we're using that data, but really what we're working on is the high impact instructional strategies. And this is going to be a focus area for professional development. And Dr. McKinnon went through and said, hey, if we do these things in our classrooms, and we use protocols, and we use walkthrough information, that will just build teacher efficacy and create a culture that will promote better instruction. Okay. I can speak from experience as a classroom teacher. When I was teaching US history at the high school, when we met as a team on a weekly basis, and we went through student work and said, hey, what do we need to do? Student work improved. It's an amazing thing. It is not about gaming the test so we get the 5% increase. People gamed the old CAP test, right? They gamed the test and they told kids, I can't believe this happened in the state of Connecticut, but they told kids, when you're doing the writing prompt, you put your thesis, and then you're going to have 3 claims to back it up. Do not worry about the veracity of those claims. Well, we're reaping that. Right? It is not about gaming the test. It is about good instruction. Okay, and the elementary folks already spoke about slow development and using the action steps. So when we're talking to teachers on our professional development days about, hey, what are your action steps? What are you learning? How are you using the data? And how are you going to change your instruction to target student needs? Those are the discussions we're having. Part of that will also be helping folks with resources and putting together resource banks that can be used. You want to end with the climate person?
And then, for family and student engagement, we're hitting on a couple areas again, similar to the district improvement plan. We have started a climate committee. It includes parents, teachers, and our students this year. And so it's really going to address some of those areas around families' understanding and communication of where their students are. So what does that look like? What are some strategies we can try? And then having that student have that go-to person within the school. So our committee will start to suggest some action plans that we can try out within our school as well. We send home a weekly JRMS update to all of our families. After any of our events that we have, we've been sending out a survey to all families to get feedback on how that went and to make adjustments. We did that with our open house. We got some really great feedback, and it led Jen and myself to decide that we needed to have, whether it's monthly or every other month, evening with administrators, because while we truly believe that our teachers and our students are the heart of our school, and we want families to work with teachers and the students, right? There are times that they want to hear from us and kind of what we're doing. So we are going to plan those nights where there are very specific topics that they select from. So they'll get to sign up, select topics, and we'll kind of present and talk to them as well.
And we're going to do pre-registration to make sure that we're just not, people are busy, we recognize that, and solicit those ideas. But if it's two people, we'll figure out a different way to have that conversation. First, oh, now we have 20 people, let's do it this way. It was over 6 minutes.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Okay. All right, so this concludes our presentation tonight on student achievement, data, and improvement plans. We've talked a little bit about a district improvement plan, which we refer to as a DIP, and a school improvement plan, which is the SIP. Our goal is to publish the district improvement plan by the end of this month. We still need to present to Eastern and Region 9. And our goal is also to adjust our goals throughout the year as we are delivering these performance assessments, and we'll get back to you frequently about how we're doing with those research-based strategies, and we'll provide updates and we'll provide insights as to kind of how the teachers are doing as well. The end of the month is our tri-board meeting, or the meeting of the 3 districts together. I actually pulled the agenda from the last 3 years and looked at the October meeting, and I've got some thoughts. I'd love to talk to the board chairs about kind of what we could do during that meeting, but I would like to present a draft of some strategic priorities in that presentation, and it'll be the first time you actually get to see those in draft form, what our different areas are. And I would really like if actually we could present it, and each board could even have conversations about it and provide feedback. And so that meeting is more of a productive kind of input, sharing, brainstorming session, not just kind of a sit and get presentation. So that concludes our presentation, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
What's the 1 or 2 minute summary for what the data looks like at the high school? How did the high school come through the past 3 years?
Well, the high school presentation is at the end of this month.
Okay.
And let me just say, since you asked for the elevator speech, let me give the elevator speech about all districts. I love what Melissa said about good to great. I do believe we are a really good school district, and I think that we can get to great. And there are some very high leverage strategies and some goals that I think get us there, plus some actions as well. I don't think we're satisfied with where we are in terms of student achievement. I do think that we can grow 2 to 3 percentage points each year to get to our DIRG level neighbors. We need to
in addition to our strategic priorities, we need to pay close attention to what they're doing as well, not just in the classroom, but what resources have they committed to? And do we need the same resources in order to get us there? So the elevator speech in summary is, we're not entirely satisfied where we are. We do believe we can grow 2-3% each year, and in some grade levels, much greater. And the high school is really in the same position, right? Like, we need to look at our PSAT scores, our AP scores, and our SAT scores. And there's been a decline. We talked about this a little bit, and you'll see similar action steps at the high school in order to kind of grow the achievement level, and other actions as well. Like during the budget process last year, we added AP courses in grade 10, which we haven't had before. So thank you for the opportunity to present the elevator.
Second question, with this testing being done in May, do we really have to wait until October to take a look at results? You know, I'm looking forward to this summer. We can't look in June.
Well, the state is getting better at getting the results back to us faster. And not this year, but in previous years before the pandemic, they were actually getting the results back to us quickly. They were released in mid-July, I would say, this year, but the results were embargoed. Basically, here are the results. You can't share them yet. We're not sharing them with the public. And I think it's because they're still sorting out data points, and they're working out when they're going to present the data to the state as well. I mean, theoretically, we could present our school improvement plans and our goal and our data in September. That could be a realistic focus. If we have a strong framework for what the plan is from now on, I do think we've done some really good work on this is the framework that's going to lead to success. So now that we have that framework, we might be able to present earlier. I don't think we could do it over the summer. I don't think people would be listening. And then the other key point of this is that it's also important to come back and at convocation and during when we meet with our teachers to share with teachers the data and to get their input on goals. And their goals aren't set up when you've got until
Middle of October.
the middle of October.
Yeah, I think it's an appropriate time to talk about the goals and the improvement plans. I was just wondering, you know, if there's a way that, you know,
Break it up.
well, just to get an advance look at the data. I mean, these things are taken on a computer, right?
They are, so while we do our testing in May, testing window for the state actually goes right to the middle of June.
Oh,
So we're still completing makeup, so the state has gotten much more efficient in making the reporting portal dynamic. But they transition about midpoint in the summer to we can log into the active testing site and look at our results, but they're not confirmed yet. They have to clean the data. They have to make sure that all of their calibrations are done. And then they release them formally in different sites here in sort of July, August, actually. But so our students are done with the test. We have some information, but it's not official yet.
Okay. That helps me understand the timeline a little better. I just
It's
love that big lag and start being a little bit crazy, not, you know, hearing the results of all your work throughout. I mean, I know you get interim looks in other ways, but thank you. Okay.
Will the Google Sheet tips and SIPs be available in a view-only way for the board members to look around?
Yes, we'd like to finish I think we can put in the Region 9 Joel Barlow High School data and goals as we get closer to their meeting, and then we can certainly publish it in a view only. And you know, there'll be a couple of tabs at the end that we haven't really shown you under the hood yet. Those tabs will be locked, but we can certainly show you the priority areas, the goals, and the action steps. And that all of this will be part of my evaluation, which we'll have to come back and talk about as well. Now we actually have something this year.
Anything in particular we should be thinking about between now and the tri-board meeting in about?
I really just have to pull together all of the data from our stakeholders and analyze the data and come up with, in the same way that I showed you tonight, like these are the focus areas. I have the broad buckets. There are 6 broad buckets. But what I'd like to do is come up with specific strategies and actions that will go in those buckets and then share them with you and then have you share and basically give your input back and say, you know, that's good. You know, you're missing in some action steps around this particular area. And so on, and then kind of sort out what are our targets for these things over the next 5 years. So I really just need time. That's really the most important commodity, is just to kind of have time to put all those actions together in those 6 broad areas.
Questions or comments on any of what we heard? Thank you, Dr. McKinnon, thank you, everybody participating. It was quite nice to hear from all the administrators across the board at what they're doing at the building level, the central office, really helpful. So there being no further business on the agenda, we'll promote Laura, second, Mike, any objections, seeing none, we're adjourned.